Welcome to Change Cycle, the podcast exploring the shift to a circular economy. Join host Christine Yeager as she dives into sustainable business actions with leading experts and confronts the discomfort that comes with change. Discover how change is at the center of optimizing recycling and creating a regenerative future. Tune into Change Cycle and be part of the solution.
Hi, welcome back to Change Cycle. And I'm going to be honest, we're going to nerd out a little bit today. If you listened to our season last season, we went deep into the Colorado program plan. And there's been a lot of new information that's come out from Circular Action Alliance. And so today we're going to nerd out on a couple of those topics. In most weeks, I try to keep this show at the altitude where any busy sustainability lead or packaging VP can listen on a commute and walk away with a couple of things that they can actually do. But every so often, these new documents or new insights that are coming related to EPR require a little bit of a deeper dive into the real mechanics of the system. This week, two of those are what I want to talk about. One is we have the first report from Circular Action Alliance about how the Oregon program is actually performing. So we've seen program plans, but now this is, what happened in the first 6 months of the program in Oregon. It's a full accounting of what a packaging EPR program in the United States actually did with producer money for 6 months. It's only half of the year, which is what the first program was, which is why everyone was surprised by the fee hike the following year. The other document is the California program plan, which we now have a glimpse of, 350 pages worth of. It's a hefty document, but it's worth a read if this is important to you. And also, if this is important to your business, there's an opportunity to comment. So it's still wet cement. Things will change, but there's a lot of great information in there. But a quick vocabulary check in the beginning. Accrual versus invoiced. An accrual is money in an organization that has been recognized, it owes, and set aside for such on the books. An invoice is a bill someone has actually submitted to get paid. They're not always the same number, and there's a lot of rules about when you can accrue certain items per which year. But it's sort of important to understand where the money is sitting in Oregon. We've talked ad nauseum about these two items. Producer Responsibility Organization, that's Circular Action Alliance in the United States. For packaging, there's also now a Pro for Textile EPR, which is Landbell USA. And then there's Responsible End Market. And this is, I like to say, the destination of EPR. EPR is trying to fund or sort of subsidize the pathway to a responsible end market so that there's actually a viable market value to the recycled material. And Oregon's law defines it very explicitly, and it's an important factor into who and what gets paid. Contamination rate. This is how much material is showing up in the recycling stream that you don't want to be there or that the system doesn't want to be there. And it is a metric that EPR is being measured by. So it needs to improve in certain states in order to meet the requirements. But generally, organizations or recyclers that are performing with a lower contamination rate have a higher financial benefit to the process. And then source reduction. This is putting physically less packaging into the market, and it's measured against the 2023 baseline year. There's a source reduction requirement both for pounds collected and number of components sold. So news roundup, a couple of things to share that's been happening. Textile EPR has taken its first deadline forward. So July 1st, producers were supposed to register with Landbell USA in compliance with the SB 707 Textile EPR law. Uh, it's the first mandatory textile EPR deadline. And so if you sell clothing or accessories or shoes or home goods that are made of textiles, not inclusive of rugs, but like sheets, blankets, those companies that sell those should have registered with Landbell by July 1st. This is just the first milestone. You don't have to report anything. It just means you have to say, I believe I'm an obligated producer. So this should feel a little familiar to anyone who lived through packaging EPR, and that packaging EPR also had a similar sort of early registration deadline for some of the states before there were reporting requirements, before there were payment requirements, things like that. A quick note that I've mentioned before is that the American Apparel and Footwear Association uh, has filed a petition challenging the selection of Landbell, but no decision has been made. There is a hearing on a preliminary injunction set for early August. Okay, now a couple of good news items. Producer money is physically on the street in Oregon and being invested into recycling in the state of Oregon. So there are a few communities across Oregon. The Dallas, which is a town on the Columbia River, has been expanding its curbside recycling. There are new pro drop-off depots being placed across the state. So some fee money has directly been spent in the state of Oregon to expand collection and recycling. So it's starting to turn, right? The flywheel is starting to turn, which is good news. Also, textile recycling infrastructure is actually getting built. This is another good news item. So we're seeing that even though EPR isn't started yet, there's a lot of momentum in the textile recycling space, reuse and recycling space, that hopefully will get ahead of the requirements for textile EPR, which, reporting and program plan, I don't think comes until 2030 or something like that. So the technology and infrastructure side is genuinely moving. There's a real momentum in textile to textile recycling. We're seeing partnerships forming at scale with fiber to fiber processing. Ireland is putting out a national roadmap for circular textiles that includes infrastructure and money behind it. And I'm just flagging this as good news because one of the single biggest failure modes for textile EPR is a fee structure that collects money faster than there's anywhere responsible for the material to go. So seeing some of these scalable technologies come in and infrastructures being built will just hopefully be an early sign and an early signal that the program will be successful from a recycling standpoint. Okay, another update is that individual source reduction plans for California were due August 1st. This is coming out after August 1st, so hopefully you've submitted them, or if not, you should notify CAA that you're working on it. But this is basically each company is having to put together a plan that says, I plan to reduce my amount of plastic, virgin plastic sold into the state of California by X percent between now and 2032. And here are my year-over-year targets. This also includes how many components you're going to reduce as well. So if you are just putting PCR in, that will only affect your percentage, but not affect the number of items that you're putting into the state. So what exactly is an individual source reduction plan? It's a forward-looking document where each producer maps out how they intend to hit the reduction trajectory over the coming years. But it is also an enforceable agreement between CAA and the company saying that this is my plan. I plan to hold to this plan. And therefore, CAA is going to measure me against this plan year over year. And there's an opportunity for bonus and malus against this plan. Now, the overall 25% reduction by 2032 is a collective producer responsibility organization level target. It's not a requirement for each company, but the collective, when added together, must reach that 25% target. So August 1st is the deadline for this plan. And likely there will be a back and forth because, time will tell how much that plan equates to in total at an industry level. Okay, so that's a bit of news or current events happening in the EPR space. Now, I want to dive into a little bit of the good, the bad, and the ugly of Oregon's first 6 months. Good news is the money is real, it's being audited, and it's moving. So, Oregon program took in about $168 million in producer fees. That's a lot of money that is earmarked for investing in the circular economy, recycling, and improving recycling rates, creating responsible end markets, getting material to responsible end markets, things of this nature. That's a large chunk. And it's higher than the 2025 6-month budget was. And it's starting to flow. So payments are going to approved MRFs, collection facilities, things that process curbside material. And all of EPR's budget really sort of earmarks budget towards curbside material versus non-curbside recyclable material. And the investment strategies sort of align to that as well. So the money flowing to sort of curbside processing facilities came into about $19 million, which was tied to a specific tonnage, roughly 8,400 tons, under just one of the fees. Local government got reimbursed for transportation, contamination, programming, and system expansion. But I do want to call out that the amount of money that went to local government was much lower than the amount estimated to go to local government. But we'll get to more of that in a minute. Statewide, the program collected about 45,000 tons of material in the July to December window, indexed against a population of roughly 4.26 million. So it's a baseline. That's a lot more data than we maybe had in previous years related to recycling pounds. But a little bit of the bad is that there's a gap between what was set aside and what actually got claimed. So now I anticipate this is very uncomfortable for CAA and potentially uncomfortable for producers as well. Now, the reality is some of this is a timing problem. Some of this is an education problem. The program accrued about $6.3 million, meaning they're expected to pay that out soon. So this is money recognized as owed for the 6-month liability. But at the time of the annual report, the amount actually claimed and invoiced was not that much. It was closer to $311. So $6.3 million was set aside, $311 actually drawn out. So that's about $6 million in contamination reduction money that local governments were entitled to and have not yet claimed. The transportation line tells a softer version of the same story. Invoiced amounts came in well under what was accrued for both glass and the broader collection list. But the report is pretty candid about these gaps and the fact that they exist. But at the end of the day, there's money sitting on the table that the system is entitled to and isn't collecting. So if you are a local government, if you are a service provider, or if you are a producer that is funding collection, be aware of what your options are. Now, producers funding collection can't go in and take any of that money right away, but they can request for an exemption before March during like January to March 31st next year. So you can begin to prepare that any producer paid collection is adequately funded. And a couple of comments about contamination. So the Portland recycling stream is had a contamination audit, and the total contamination rate was just under 25%. Of that, more than 22% was material that is flatly not accepted in the program. So it's just program, we shouldn't even be recycling it. So that's most of that contamination is wish cycling. So one of four things going into the recycling stream in the state's largest metro shouldn't be there. And that's a direct ongoing drag on every downstream cost in the system. But one aspect of this I want to call out is that we didn't have this type of information. The audit was based on 554 samples, and of those, 544 came from Metro Portland, and only 10 came from the rest of the entire state. So this report is very skewed directly towards what's happening in Portland, and we still don't have the data of what's going on outside of that city. And so that means that there's still a lot of unknowns, even though this is more information than we had maybe prior. And the report is very honest about that. It says our data set outside one metro is too small to trust. And so they're being honest in a way that's respectable, right? I will say, hopefully we'll see this change in 2026. And as more people are aware of the funding availability, as tools and processes are stood up, because at the end of the day, only 30% of what was available to be spent was actually spent. So there's a big gap. So hopefully we see that gap close in 2026. Other big topic, big bucket item I want to share is that the California program plan is available for anybody to read. Again, 350 pages is long, but if you're a producer, I would really dig into the fee setting and how the fee setting methodology comes together. There's sort of four key aspects of how the fees are allocated. I would say that it is much more complicated than any of the other states because California has this plastic pollution mitigation fund that needs to be allocated to plastic material, as well as this reuse investment requirement that needs to be also allocated to plastic materials in theory. And so there's a fee associated with those items, as well as an opportunity for a bonus if you are meeting or exceeding your source reduction plans. It's just there's a lot of factors that go into ultimately what a producer will be paying at the end of the day. And that's potentially worth commenting on if you are a producer. And again, you have an opportunity to comment between now and August 14th. The program plan also goes deep into where they plan to invest as it relates to materials that are not considered recyclable, or at least it starts to scratch the surface there. Another key point is that there are a list of materials that are generally not recyclable or not fully compliant with recyclability, that CAA is asking that the deadline for when they need to be considered recyclable is extended by 2 to 4 years, depending on the material. So if you're a producer that uses those materials, or you are a responsible end market who produces that material in recyclable manner, like it is, like you're selling the recycled material, or if you are a supplier who produces that material in general, it'll be important for you to take a look at those categories of material that are deemed that are going to be flagged as in process to become compliant from a recyclability standpoint versus not planning to be compliant. Because as much as fees are a signal, that indicator will be a huge signal as to whether or not CAA or EPR is investing in making that material become recyclable and what that investment might look like. Good news is flexible film is flagged as something to work towards recyclability, but it is also flagged as something to delay the deadline against. And this deadline currently is 2032. A few other areas to look at would be if you are a recycler, then you should dive in deep into how you're identified as being classified as able to receive reimbursement. If you're a service provider or somebody who collects or sorts or transports, you should dive into what the definition of it you need to meet in order to become flagged as available for reimbursement, as well as what all is being reimbursed. So one thing that's unique to California is that they're reimbursing like consulting costs for service providers who need a third-party consultant to help them complete the reporting requirements, for example. So I would dive into what those are, and then if something is not sitting right with your business model, make a dedicated comment on such. Yeah, I think those are the two big documents that are out there for review. There's a couple things that comment periods have passed that you might consider looking at. Also, I'm recording this before August 4th, and I will call out that the Oregon National Association of Wholesalers has a trial that's kicking off on July 13th. So it would be in the past by the time this launches, but to sort of keep tabs on what that progress might be. And I'll keep I'll put a link in the show notes for you in case that's of interest. But at the end of the day, I think these documents and some of the news that I'm sharing is continued examples of really that forming stage of EPR. And since we always talk about change here, why embrace this messy middle? I think reading a program's first 6 months books and diving into the good, the bad, and the ugly of this is a great way to kind of demystify this process and sort of see what's really happening. And I think also, we want to champion the progress. But as you can see with this program update is that progress is imperfect, but it's still progress. The more you're armed with this information, the more you see the gaps, the more you can better inform back to the producer responsibility organization, whether it's in the packaging space or potentially use these lessons to inform the textile space, right? You might comment on the California program plan in response to some of the imperfect progress you're seeing in the Oregon program plan. So, what are some practical tips for you to sort of navigate this change? You might read these documents, although they're hefty. Maybe find the chapters that matter most to your business that are sort of geared towards producer or recycler, depending on who you are. But do sit with it a little bit. Spend a little bit of time digesting and forming your own opinion and point of view on the information. And when a number looks alarming, maybe ask about the sample size and some of the realistic barriers that might be playing into that number. But don't let the idea that it's operational now talk you out of reading carefully and critically of what that operational definition means and what those details are starting to look like for those folks that are investing in changing the system. And thank you if you made it this far, thanks for nerding out with me and reading the fine print with me. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Change Cycle. We hope that today's conversation inspires you to embrace the change that comes with building a world where circularity and social equity power the economy. Visit csyimpact.com to learn more about how you can implement sustainable strategies in your business. That's csyimpact.com. Thanks again, and we look forward to having you join us next time on Change Cycle.